Ed the Squirrel, the story of the green tomatoes. In the heart of Nash Vegas, a cool southern town, lives a small, clever creature with fur white and brown. A squirrel's what he is, but if you like names instead, then we'll call him his name, which happens to be Ed. Ed lives in a tree, in a yard, by a home. His friends often visit, so he isn't alone. He spends the day climbing the tree up and down, and running along the wood fence round and round. Sometimes he'll jump up on the roof of the house and scurry across it. It sounds just like a mouse. But surely you don't want only to read of the day-to-day playtime this squirrel has. Indeed, I imagine you want to hear of a caper, so stunning, so cunning, it made all the papers. The tale of how Ed ate like a rich squirrel by taking tomatoes grown by a beautiful girl. But even more special is how Ed learned at last that it's better to share than to be cunning or fast. The beautiful girl lives in the house by Ed's tree. She and her husband and a cat named Charlie. One day, she decided to make a small garden, so her husband made a box to put all the dirt in. And then the girl planted all sorts of good veggies, like onions and peppers and carrots. So yummy. But the food most exciting for Ed to behold was tomatoes. To him, they were better than gold. For weeks, Ed watched as the tomatoes grew slowly. Patience is quite hard for squirrels, you see. He waited for a sign the tomatoes were ready. He hoped it was time because his stomach was empty. Then one day he saw the girl come out to the garden. She took 2 tomatoes and went back on in. From his perch he could see straight into the window. As she cut up the tomatoes and ate them, oh no! Ed had hoped he could have the tomatoes she'd grown. He had wanted them badly. He thought they had known. How tired he was of oranges and nuts. He felt like his diet was stuck in a rut. Ed didn't know people don't commonly grow a garden for squirrels. It's for people, you know. But now Ed was desperate. The tomatoes looked great. He'd do anything to have them on his plate. So he formed a big plan to get some himself before they all went in the house on a shelf. He'd seen the girl take her tomatoes inside, but not until they had turned red on the outside. Ed decided he needed to take them before they ripened to red and were taken indoors. So he called his plan Ed's Operation Unseen and plotted to take the tomatoes while green. A few days passed by, and the plan was all set. The house was all empty, except Charlie, their pet. But Charlie was sleeping, so Ed made his move. He climbed down the tree, very slow, very smooth. He hopped through the grass and climbed up the deck. It didn't take long. It's a very short trek. And then he was there, right below the green vine, with tomatoes so lovely, so green. All mine! Ed grabbed a tomato, so happy inside. He sat on the railing and he ate it with pride. So grateful was he for this small, special treat that he left a small piece as a sign of his feat. Later, the girl saw Ed had taken a treat. She laughed and said, "Oh, he can have one to eat." But soon she would find Ed had only begun. With tomatoes so tasty, he couldn't eat just one. Ed was now hooked on this delicious fresh fruit. He wanted much more, and he wanted it soon. So the next day he waited until no one would see, and he climbed down again from his big leafy tree. And this time he brought a friend on his trip, and not one, but 2 tomatoes they picked. They ate very well, and they slept great that night, knowing more tomatoes would soon be in sight. Inside the house, no one was sleeping so good. Tomatoes were gone, and no one understood why the squirrel took them before they were red. It's okay to take one, but share 2, they said. What to do, what would do, they wondered all day, to keep little Ed from his tomatoey ways. If they bought Ed a feeder, then maybe he wouldn't take all the tomatoes, 'cause really, he shouldn't. So they got him a big block of peanuts and corn. He'll love this for sure, said the man at the store. Sure enough, Ed ate up his food like they hoped, but they hadn't expected what came next. Nope. As soon as he finished his treat, he was back to get a tomato for a late evening snack. How could he? Why would he? The girl wondered aloud, and her husband just sat there and furrowed his brow. They could not understand why Ed wouldn't share when they'd tried so incredibly hard to be fair. Perhaps, she said, no, it couldn't be right that no one has told Ed that sharing is nice. The next day, the girl walked right up to Ed's tree and said, please have dinner with my husband and me. So that night, they sat on the deck and they ate. A wonderful meal. Ed cleaned his whole plate. They told Ed how happy they were just to meet a squirrel like him, who was smart as could be. They said how his fur looked so soft and so clean. They liked how he was kind to his friends and not mean. But there is just one thing we thought you should know. Sharing is better for everyone, you know. Ed wasn't sure what they meant by those words. He liked what they had said about his smarts and his fur, but sharing was something he didn't quite know. Did it have something to do with all the tomatoes? And then they told Ed how fun it can be to share with the people that you know and you meet. It was great that you liked the tomatoes, they said, but maybe you could let some of them ripen to red. Red is the color Ed's squirrely cheeks turned, as he saw for the first time what he never had learned. Yes, tomatoes taste better than pickled pig's feet, but sharing with others is the best kind of treat. And that is the message that Ed asked us to give to you in this book, so that with each day you live, you'll remember that sharing is a much better treat than the bestest, most wonderful food you could eat. And sharing is not just for cute little squirrels, but for nice little boys and sweet little girls.